Welcome back, everyone. It's ajbarse, and this is the part 2 to my smorgasbord of screen capturing solutions. Now, I'm taking screen capturing from my normal Basecamp to Everest approach. So things like Screencast-O-Matic, where you can just easily turnkey in front of a camera and have a green screen and have yourself float over your content. And then there's OBS, which is the summit of the Everest. This is where you can pretty much use any video input that your computer can see as your presentation. And that's why I wanted dedicated a solid video to it. So in this tutorial, I'm going to show you what you're looking at, which is OBS. And I wanted to start here because this is the last time you're going to see me for a little bit. I'm going to show you how to build in OBS this setup. You can see that I have scenes, which allows me to toggle in between various different things that I have set up. And this is really where the flexibility of OBS comes in. Right now you're on my main teaching display, which is my MacBook or my Firefox, but I can also jump over to my iPhone and show you things that are on my mobile device and easily just jump back. And then lastly, if I didn't want to do that, I could also just knock out everything and just record audio if I wanted to. So that's the power of this application, is that it allows you as a content creator to live switch whatever your material needs are. So with that said, let's go ahead and take a look at how to set this up for you. So I want to walk through a little bit of what OBS's kind of principles are, because when you first see OBS, it can be a little bit daunting. So the first thing is that you have your scene up here. This is your output. Down here is all of your inputs that you're either putting in or that you're switching to. So think of this down here as your switcher, like you see those broadcasters with the big boards, right? That's what this is down here. Now, the main control is a scene. So think of it as a workflow. When you're teaching, maybe you have a main teaching scene, like I do, where you have your desktop right here, and maybe your little picture-in-picture down below. Or maybe you switch and you go to this, where you're teaching off of a mobile device. Or maybe you're just audio narrating and you just have a PowerPoint or your presentation running over the top as you're narrating. OBS can do all of that. So to get started, let me show you how to walk through, because this is very device specific. Whether it's a Mac or a PC, you still have to kind of go through a setup tool. So to get started, you'll notice that you'll have no scenes, no sources, and nothing going on down here, and you'll be greeted with this auto configuration wizard. If we were doing a stream, we would actually go through the configuration wizard to point to that stream. But because we're using a local recording, we're going to go ahead and just say optimize the recording, but not for streaming. We're going to go ahead and hit next. And it should pull for what your video settings are. So for instance, my display is 1440 by 900, and you can specify the frames per second, FPS. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you, typically speaking, when we're doing lecturing, 30 frames a second is just fine. You don't have to have high frame rate. You're not doing bullet time here. So just to save some processing power, I'm gonna go ahead and just say, just use the current 30 frames a second and my configuration for my display. If you find that you're on an older machine, you may want to reduce your resolution to something like 720. But if you have a more contemporary, like a MacBook Pro or something, I usually just use my current display, and it usually records just fine. 30 frames a second and my resolution, and we're going to hit next. Then it's going to go ahead and do a whole bunch of different broadcast sampling tests. So I'm going to go ahead and let it do its thing, and I'll get right back to you. Okay, so now that that's all done, we can see what the final test results are, and this will optimize our settings. Decided that my base resolution is indeed that. We can do a high quality medium file size, and my output's going to be 1440 by 900. Great, let's go ahead and apply. So what I'm going to do is show how to set up scene. So there's 3 different scenes I'm going to set up. One is audio only, so that I can just narrate over the top of a presentation. The second one is going to be just my base recording as an instructor, which is going to be whatever's on my computer screen and yours truly. And then the last one is going to be my mobile device. And I'm going to show you how you can splice in your mobile device into your teaching and go in between your mobile device and your computer. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is set up those scenes. So by default, we have one single scene. I'm going to go ahead and rename that scene by right mouse clicking, rename, and I'm going to call this main teaching. And I'm going to click off, don't hit return. And that will commit that name. The next thing is I'm going to go over to my sources. We don't have any yet, but there are several sources we have to set up. One is my big burly microphone. So let's do that first. I'm going to add the plus. I'm going to go to my audio capture input. And I'm going to go ahead and call this the big mic. And hit OK. Once we do that, we can select from our devices from a drop-down, and my Shure MV5 is right there. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And I can tell that it's working because right here, I see in my audio mixer, I now have audio channels. Great. I can adjust my recording volume should I need to, or adjust the settings of it using the gear. But that would just get us audio. We need to add video sources as well. So let's go back to the plus under our source, and let's go ahead and go to our display capture. We're going to call this, in my case, my MacBook screen, and hit OK. And now it'll grab my display, and we can opt to show our cursor or hide it if you didn't want to have that cursor in your screen. For me, I like having my cursor, so I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And now we notice that it fills our frame. Now we need to kind of scale this down because our screen is much bigger than what our output looks, or our output preview is. So to do that, no differently than when we would change a graphic in like Word or in Photoshop, I can just grab the handle of the display and just scale it so that it fits the output frame, the black window of my broadcast. And just like that, we now have anything that happens on our screen happens in OBS. The next thing I'm going to do is, again, let's rinse, wash, and repeat. Let's go to source. Let's go to plus. And this time we're going to add video capture device. And I'm going to call this camera. And hit OK. Now that I have that, I'm going to select my camera that I'm recording on right now. And now I'm back. Now, my presets, if you're not really focusing on yourself, I would actually downsize the sampling resolution of your camera so that you can save some processing power on your machine. So typically when you see me, I'm actually only 640 by 480. And that just saves on resolution and recording in space. You can even go down even further if you wanted to, but beyond that, it kind of gets down into the Motorola Razr of video, and I don't prefer it. But typically speaking, 640 by 480, or if you want a wider resolution, 960 by 540 will save you some processing power. The only difference between this is really the crop. So if you use your hands a lot, you may want to have the wider aspect resolution. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. Now that I have that, I can reposition it where I would like it. And more specifically, I can change the size of it because, man, I am still large. There we go. There. So that's about what you normally see me as, maybe a little bit bigger, depending on what I'm doing. So that's great. So now we've got our main scene with our camera, our display, and we have our big microphone tied in. So the next thing we need to do is knock out my green screen. So now that we have this set up, we can go to our camera over here in our source, and we can right mouse click, and we can add what's called a filter. When we add filters, we have two different kinds. We have audio video filters and effects filter. Well, when we do green screening, it's called keying. So we're going to add a keying filter. So if we add plus, you'll notice that there's several different kinds of keying. We got a luma key, a color key, and specifically a chroma key. We're going to go ahead and hit chroma key, and we're going to call this green screen be gone, and hit OK. And when just like that, my green screen is now activated. We can change our color of screen. So for instance, if you have a blue backdrop as opposed to a green, you can actually key that out. Or you can specify a specific color if you know exactly the color code of the cloth that you're using. And if you know a little bit about like light wrapping and stuff, you do have tolerances and stuff that you can adjust down here. 9 times out of 10, if you have decent lighting, there's nothing much you have to do. Even the fringing is really well adjusted for in OBS. I don't usually do a lot of adjustments for fringe or for color casting. Once we have that, I'm going to go ahead and hit close. And just like that, the magic of broadcast is alive, and now I am green screened within my frame. So now that we have this scene set up, I have myself floating as a floating head, I have my content right here, and I have my big burly microphone. I promised you that I could also switch in between different devices if I was doing a lecture. So now that we have this scene built, I'm going to right mouse click on it and I'm going to go ahead and duplicate it. This saves us some time. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and rename this as iPhone teaching. And hit OK. So now that I have that, what this allows me to do is have two scenes, which are exactly the same right now. In our sources, we can turn off or disable a input. So for me, I'm going to turn off the MacBook screen. So now I just have me floating. And I'm going to plug in my phone. Okay. And I'm using an iPhone. This also works for Android devices as well. So your mileage may vary, see store for details, but I'm going to show it for an iPhone workflow. Once I have it plugged in, I'm going to go ahead and add a source. And I'm going to, again, do a video capture device. I'm going to call this my iPhone. Go ahead and hit OK. And I'm going to go ahead from my device dropdown, select my iPhone. Now that my iPhone is selected, it will do auto rotate, so you don't have to worry about that. I'm going to go ahead and just keep it at 1280 by 720. And now I have my iPhone, and anything that happens on my iPhone will show up in my display. But you'll notice it's encroaching on me. So over in our sources, no differently than in Photoshop, we can relayer this. I'm going to take my SE and put it down below my MacBook screen, and now I pop to the front. So this is a really helpful tool, especially as you're doing demonstrations. You can go specifically from a mobile solution where you're teaching about, I don't know, web development, and you're trying to show how responsive design works or something like that. Now, I'm going to go back to my presentation. I'm going to go ahead and go to my main teaching, and I can fade in between those two. Now, you can also do this between different apps. Let's say you set up a scene where you had Firefox and PowerPoint. You want to jump between the two. You could build a scene the same way. So right now I have Firefox going on in my browser, and this is where I have my WordPress site. I want to go back to OBS, and what I'm going to do is in the sources, we're going to add a new source. We're going to add a window capture. Now, window capture allows you to capture anything that is open. So it could be the browser, PowerPoint, Keynote, whatever. I'm going to go ahead, in my case, I'm going to call it Firefox. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And I'm going to go ahead and navigate to the window that I want captured. There it is. Okay, so now you can't see me. That's because you can't see OBS. What I'm going to do is just scale so that this... Hi everyone, still here, I promise. If you notice, when we created a new source, it takes Firefox and puts it on the top. And just like we did before, we have to drag this down below to our screen so that it kind of goes in the order of succession. You want kind of your eyesight to be on top, and you want your other things to follow suit. But just for demonstration, what I'm going to do is take Firefox and go ahead and scale it so that it fits my display. And this is kind of part of the magic of OBS, is that when we do this, and just so that you can see what I'm doing, I'm going to take Firefox and drag it below, and I'm going to poke the eyeball of my MacBook screen. So there we go. Now, this is what's great about doing recordings this way. You now can go through your lecture. So I'm going to cheat just a skosh so that you can kind of see what I'm doing. So now that you can kind of see behind the scenes literally what I'm doing, my sources are over here and my scenes are over here. Because I have Firefox up on top, it hides OBS behind it. And that way you can come back here and change stuff, and you see it, but nobody else does. So if I were to do the same presentation, here's WordPress, you know, it's mobily responsive and such. But if we were to look on it on a mobile phone, you also can tell that it will adjust accordingly and such. And nobody's the wiser. Nobody can see behind your window. So that's a nice way of doing it. And it doesn't matter if you're doing this between a mobile device or if you're doing this for another app, you can just jump between scenes. And as long as the OBS is on the back, in the layers down below, nobody will be able to see you changing your scenes. All right, so now that we've gone through all of that, that's the setup. We've gone through making some scenes. And again, you can have as many scenes as you want. I really focused on really the main teaching and the iPhone teaching, but an audio only would be just simply the audio input and maybe adding a source as a window if you were just doing a presentation. So again, I was trying to build in a little bit of flexibility so that you can jump in between your scenes. Now, once we have all this set up, we can verify that our mic is sounding good, and I can see my view meters right here. And the next part is record. So once you're done, we can come over here to our right-hand side panel where our controls live, and we can just hit start record. Once we're done recording though, it's real simple. All we need to do is come down and hit stop record. Typically this gets recorded to your video or movies folder on your computer. If we need to specify a different location, we can always go to settings and we can go to output and we can specify the recording path. So that wraps up this tutorial on the summit of all screen capturing softwares, which is OBS. Hopefully this will help you bring up your game when it comes to doing your lecture capture. Now, remember, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me either online, on email, or even through my blog. Yeah, I'm even going to use OBS just even for my wrap up. You can reach out to me here, even right here on my blog, because I have a chat that allows you to chat with me if I'm online, or you can just send me an email real easy. Thank you again so much, and hopefully this helps you bring up your game when it comes to either OBS or using lecture capture.